for the third session of the 12th National Assembly, laid on the table of the House on 24th July 2019. Does the seconder wish to speak now or later?
Now, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Kapiri MP.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. To start with, I would like to express my gratitude to the chairman of our committee, Honourable Simfukwe, Member of Parliament from Mbala. Madam, in beginning my secondment of our report from our committee, the House is aware that Her Honour the Vice President this morning made an indication that in a few days' time, the House will adjourn sine die. The matters that the mover of the motion has raised this morning, Madam Speaker, speak to the livelihood of the Zambian people. And discussing this just before the House rises is extremely important. We do open sittings and then we get to adjourn. It's part of our normal routine maintenance here. But when you look at what we raise in our report, it speaks in the sense that there's been a significant change in the Zambian way of life. Our families today, Madam Speaker, are struggling to make ends meet. Meals have become extremely difficult to put on the table. Zambian families, just like their government, are in debt now. Behind on rentals, can't pay school fees. We have seen that what the government had initially promised the people to say, for instance, in the case of subsidies, the removal of subsidies on electricity, the benefits that the government had promised have not trickled down to our families. Instead, they've made life much, much more difficult. But in saying this, Madam Speaker, I want to salute the Zambian people. Saluting them because they've shown the true character of our nation, that in the midst of difficulties, they've still been able to fight and endure difficulties that have not happened because lightning struck twice in the same place. But some people need to be held responsible for what we are doing, what has happened to our families today. Where are we as a nation? We are in a very delicate situation, Madam Speaker. This report paints the picture of exactly the way the nation is. But when we hear ministers here speaking, they speak something completely different. Completely different. We are in a delicate situation as a country. And my recommendation, Madam Speaker, is that at this stage where we are, this government needs to focus as a #1 priority, fixing the economy. These problems that the mover of the report has brought to the House will not disappear automatically. The report is calling for leadership. Why are we in this situation, Madam Speaker? It's because government has been reckless in some of the decisions it has made. Completely reckless. At cabinet level, it is very clear, Madam Speaker, in the structure of, say, our Constitution, that a lot of power is placed in the hands of the executive. From the presidency, the vice presidency, the ministers, the provincial ministers. These are the people that run government. There's very little that is done by Parliament. They are responsible for raising funds, for executing expenditure. It is them that do it. And it's good that some of them are in the House this morning. Some problems, in fact, all of the problems have been caused by the executive. Because on the revenue side, Madam Speaker, we are not very bad as a nation. The problem is on the expenditure. Systems must change, and responsibility must start right from the top at State House. Within the walls of power of State House, irresponsible decisions have been made, plunging our country into economic hardships. I'll give you an example, Madam Speaker. This is not the first time that our country has faced economic hardships. It isn't. I don't remember much about the Kaunda administration, the first administration, but the books of history are there in our libraries. It is not the first time that our nation has been plunged into economic difficulties. But the structure at that time is different from now, Madam Speaker. That time, we had a socialist state. Government owned pretty much everything. parastatals, most of the manufacturing was done by companies that government had a hand in. Similarly, it was like a state where you have a father at household level. His salary is bad. That was what happened in the First Republic. He is failing to provide salt, mealie meal, and so on and so forth. But the system now is different. We are so liberalized. The private sector is trying to push. It is similar to a situation where you have a father at household level. He's getting a handsome salary. Good amounts of money. But he's spending money on drinking Jameson. He's spending money on girlfriends, for instance. He's building a mansion, but forgetting that the children that he himself bore, the children that he fathered, are not eating well. Children are wearing torn clothes. He's forgetting that even the wife in his household is selling in a market when he is spending recklessly. That is the situation that we have now. It is a very sad situation. The patriotic government, I don't know, maybe they've chosen to make our country into a museum of poverty so that we can be laughed at by other people. I'll give you an example, another one, Madam Speaker. The committee looked at how much money this government is giving to the education sector. Very little. But the dogma of pretense on government is extreme. They keep pretending that everything is fine. It's very surprising that when you look at what money the government is putting into education, what we are disbursing, the ministers responsible for education in this country, they never raise the flag because of the same pretense I'm talking about. CBU, for instance, the funding that goes to that university, Madam Speaker, is laughable. You may be interested to know that the engineers at CBU, because of poor funding from government, lack of proper planning, the same things, the same figures, they've been convicted by the figures in our report. University, CBU, the engineers that we train, in a time like this when we need great thinkers in our country, they don't have a laboratory for engineers. They have to come all the way to the University of Zambia. Mechanical engineering students have to go to NOTEC in Indore because of poor funding. But again, because of pretense on the part of government, they've shut the university indefinitely. And yet, the real issue is funding. We looked at these things as a committee. It is very clear. 3 weeks before the institution was closed, the situation funding-wise, poor funding, was ripe. It was serious. For 3 weeks before closure of that university, Madam Speaker, unionized workers were on go-slow. Even workers that actually clean ablution blocks. For the last 1 week before the closure of the institution, the ablution blocks were unusable. And yet, government collects revenue from students. Their exams were never going to be written anyway because of funding problems. We are the committee that looks at revenue and how it is spent. Government intends to spend 11 billion kwacha, Madam Speaker, on putting cameras at that university. Reckless expenditure again. It's been done before. CCTV cameras. And yet the blame is on innocent students, but the real issue is to do with how much money is put on education. If you check the figures, Madam Speaker, I'm tempted to talk about the FIG report because it was delivered to this nation in the same quarter in which our committee was reviewing. The country is looking to this parliament, Madam Speaker. It is very important that that institution is protected. Its powers must never be diluted. The country is looking to this parliament to strengthen that institution. Their figures have been very consistent. You'll be interested to know, Madam Speaker, that when you tabulate all the figures that the FIC report has reported to the nation in the last few years, including in this court, what you will see that the millions of dollars that have been recklessly spent by the Patriotic Front government actually exceed the $750 million that we shall pay in 2022 towards the Eurobond. It exceeds that by far. Reckless spending locally more than what is in the Eurobond. Madam Speaker, this country, whether we like it or not, Madam Speaker, this country is owned by the youth, just by its demographic.
Honorable Deputy Chief Whip, I am very slow to allow that point of order because the honorable member on the floor is seconding the motion that has just been moved. And because I want debate to flow, and I expect that as you will be debating, you deal with some of the issues the report has raised. And for that reason, I'm not allowing that point of order. Continue, Honorable Member for Kapiri MP.
Madam Speaker, we are saying this country can be better than this. We will not accept this kind of treatment of our people. My constituency constitutes farmers. We looked at the figures as committee. How much did government disburse the Ministry of Agriculture? Government is doing everything it can to dilute the powers of this house. They produce budgets. What they disburse is something else. In the second quarter that was under review by the committee, only, Madam Speaker, 27% of what the Minister of Agriculture asked for was given. In the first quarter, 10%. And yet, every time, in fact, especially this week, Patriotic Front members of Parliament and the government at large have been saying that the focal point of their diversification program is agriculture. These figures don't support them. They are paying lip service to this country. There's no way you can support agriculture with minimal figures and then you claim that diversification is the fulcrum of how you're going to run this country. It is not just true. And it is completely unfair. If anything, government owns farmers in Kapiri money, and that goes countrywide. One of the reasons when you hear the Minister of Finance speaking to this house, the reason why our economy will perform so badly is because of poor rainfall. Now we are going to blame God, right? That's not correct, and it's completely unfair. For successive seasons, Madam Speaker, PF government has underfunded the agriculture sector. Completely underfunded it. When you check in different constituencies, you find that even just delivering bags of fertilizer has become rocket science for our government. There is no proper investment. When you look at our budget, there's no proper investment that is going into the agriculture sector. Nothing. Look at how much money is spent on the youth. Nothing. This country, the Patriotic Front government must realize that they should stop looking at the youth as though they're a cost to this nation. The young people are not a cost. They're a dividend. They're a dividend. We are not a cost as young people. And we will never be. This country, its strength, Madam Speaker, is embedded in our resolve as young people. That is why, with this kind of leadership, even as we get closer to election time, for us, the next election, Madam Speaker, is the most important of our generation. Because government is not funding us, we have resolved, Madam Speaker, we have resolved that it does not matter how many T-shirts are distributed. It does not matter how many songs are produced. Come 2021, for the love of country and our flag.
Honorable Member, you are doing very well so far, and I urge you not to stray. The issues you are bringing in about T-shirts and songs, they have nothing to do with the report. Granted, you are in order to discuss the challenges that the youths face, but do so without bringing in those issues that may be viewed as being partisan. Continue with your seconding.
Madam Speaker, again we are saying that this country can be better than this if certain things are put in place. The systems must change. Government priorities must change. Our report speaks to our exchange rate as a country. Our report also speaks to the reserves that have been spent on debt servicing. We are again in a critical situation. Traditionally, what happens is that our budget is structured in such a way that a big chunk of it goes into managing salaries, emoluments. But you may wish to know, Madam Speaker, that the tables have been changed by the PF. Debt servicing, for the first time in our country, first time, what we are spending on debt servicing has exceeded the wage bill for the entire civil service, including here at Parliament. And yet, in the spirit of pretense again, they say they want the nation to accept that they are building roads. You can't run an economy like that. The economy, even the World Bank has said it, the IMF has emphasized it, and we are doing so here on the left. Even the committee believes in it. What we are saying is that to run our economy, it has to be balanced. And the Zambian people have summed it up very well. People cannot eat roads. We must push that the cost of food goes down. The cost of meal, look at it. It does not matter how good our roads are, but if our people are plunged in poverty, then there's no leadership. It can't work like that. And then when we're talking about these serious issues, we will hear our colleagues mocking the Zambian people to say, no, mukaziri ima magade. You can't run a country like that. It has to be balanced, and there's no excuse, Madam Speaker. The government must stop being casual on the issue of the exchange rate being this bad. It talks to everything that our economy must achieve. If the exchange rate is as high as it is, it means our debt is too high. The first thing we must do as a nation in bringing down the debt level is managing the exchange rate. Because where we are today at 12.8 kwacha to the dollar, if we push our exchange rate to 6 or 5 kwacha, consequently, the debt quantum also responds to that dollar exchange rate. But the PF have been very casual in dealing with it. The only time you hear about them talking about the exchange rate is they'll pretend and say, there's relative stability, but we're import-oriented. Relative stability is not enough. The exchange rate must be managed downwards. And there are small, small things that are critical that this government must do. They must plug everything. The executive must begin to plug everything that is pushing dollars out of the country. The austerity measures that they are talking about must mean something, first of all, at cabinet level. Because if you look at the Zambian people, we've been living under austerity already. People are suffering. That's what the report is saying when we talk about the exchange rate. Austerity must be seen at cabinet level. For instance, Madam Speaker, I will challenge them on behalf of the Zambian people. Maybe we should pack the 4x4s. Because you don't need the GX to come from government complex, for instance. I'm just being told that's how the Indians have done it. We can cut costs by parking the 4x4s, or if anything, we sell them, buy saloon cars, and then come to Parliament. That way we'll spend less on fuel, on maintenance, then austerity will make sense. That's how it is. Reckless spending. has to be managed at that level, Madam Speaker. When there are things that have been let loose, the loans and guarantees, it's been deliberate on the part of government not to bring it here.
Order, Honourable Member for Kapiri MP, as the time is 10:40.
For a few minutes, I'd highlighted a number of issues, but in the interest of time, because I only have a minute and a half, I want to take this opportunity and make some recommendations to government. Point number one is that government must make our recovery program out of these economic hardships, make the youth the center of our economic recovery. I say this, Madam Speaker, because as a nation collectively, our factory output is non-existent. We need factories to be created by this government so that as young people can take shifts in working. Even the suit I'm wearing is imported. Maybe even my underwear is imported. Everything is imported.
We are not interested in your underwear, Honourable Member for Kapiri MP. You have made your point on the suit. End there.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That was meant in a light moment. We also need government to engage the IMF more seriously, Madam Speaker. Their recommendations will help this country. We need government also to restructure procurement. It should not be skewed towards the Chinese alone. Zambian businesses need to strive so that we can move and contribute more taxes to our nation. Lastly, Madam Speaker, I would like to say that government must be at the center stage of pushing so that the country stops electioneering every month, campaigning every month. Let's focus on the real issues of making the livelihood of our people better. Enough of campaigns. Madam Speaker, I thank you. I beg to second.